Emily, the expectation in government is that Rishi Sunak will set out extra support when he outlines his spending review next month. And the idea being looked at is, as you say, that idea put forward by Henry Dimbleby, the founder of the Leon food chain. And that would see extra money going to councils for an extension of his summer clubs, his food clubs. And they had been trialled in 17 of England's most deprived local authority areas. So let's look at the idea that he put forward in that report. It was an independent report published in July, but of course it was commissioned by the government. And this is what he said about his holiday activity and food programme. He talked about how children on these holiday schemes receive at least one meal a day, which meets the school food standards. The programme includes an element of nutritional education to improve children's knowledge and awareness of food, as well as training and advice sessions for families on how to source, prepare and cook nutritious, low-cost food. It's important to say that he then recommended, Henry Dimbleby, in that report, that this scheme should be expanded across England. He said that would cost £200 million, but of course what we're now talking about is it going over the Christmas holiday and obviously potentially then into the Easter holiday.
What are you sensing, Nick, as this is being rolled out or put forward, about the mood in the party? How have we actually got here? Well,
there is dismay and astonishment amongst Conservative MPs at the moment. They're saying, look, the Conservatives have a very good story to tell on free school meals. It was the coalition government that extended universal free school meals for the youngest children in primary schools. But one Conservative MP said to me, but it looks like we are taking food out of the mouths of hungry children. Now, Boris Johnson and ministers were told that when they did the U-turn in the summer to accept that Marcus Rashford idea then of free school meals during the summer holidays, they were told you've got to do this at Christmas. That obviously wasn't acted on. Now, Boris Johnson is saying that he thinks that Labour is being hypocritical here because Labour did not extend free school meals into the holiday period when they were in government. What Conservative MPs are saying to that is, look, Labour's not your opponent here. Your opponent here is a cherished national footballer who seems to be sensing the national mood. I'm picking up real unease and despair amongst government whips. They're saying they worked really hard last week to reduce a rebellion and they could see this coming. And one former minister likened the government's performance here. They said it's like the scene in the Austin Powers movie. The steamroller is running towards you and it just keeps going.
Nick, thanks very much indeed. We'll be picking this up with our guests in just a moment. But first, there was another change in policy announced over the weekend, which could have an even more detrimental effect on the life chances of our poorest children. Our policy editor, Lewis Goodall, has been at one school in Coventry to investigate.
The Hillfields estate in Coventry is home to some of the poorest kids in Britain. The uncomfortable truth is that they're starting their lives with profound disadvantage. Save for this one, because the kids here have Sydney Stringer, an Ofsted outstanding school with some of the best results in the region. But in this torrid age of ours, there's only so much even this school can do. 53% of the pupils are on free school meals. The staff have no doubt that the withdrawal of the government voucher scheme will have an effect on their welfare and their learning.
In principle, we all agree that children who are disadvantaged, who struggle and come from families where they struggle to get food, should be fed.
So just to be clear, to those people who say that this scheme does not benefit many children, in your experience, that is not true for your students?
It does benefit students, definitely.
Have you seen, at the moment, like what's been going on, all the discussion with like Marcus Rashford about free school meals and all that? What do you think about that, like free school meals? Do you think it's important, it's a good thing, bad thing?
It's good because he doesn't really need free school meals because he's a footballer, but he done it for other people.
Yeah?
And he's selfless.
And do you think, do you know people at the school who have had the free school meals, the vouchers, and during the... Yeah, you've done it?
Uh-huh.
And was it helpful? Was it good?
Yeah.
Helps you learn?
Yeah, kind of.
But it isn't just hunger which might be a problem. Back in April, the government promised free laptops and tablets to help disadvantaged pupils. Over time, some were indeed received, but it only works out at about 14 per institution. Far more were expected. And yet late on Friday night, heads received this email saying that their IT allocations have been substantially reduced.
When we were told that one of our schools within the trust was getting 111 devices, we thought, well, that's great. And we were very shocked to see that that figure was reduced to 22 at the weekend. We know that we've given devices to students who are isolating in extreme hardship cases, but we still know even with that, there's about 100 students who claim to have bad competition over devices at home and are struggling.
What is the net result of those kids not getting the devices that you'd previously been allocated by the Department for Education, do you think?
I think if students have fewer devices, there will be more competition over devices at home, and there will be students who struggle if they're self-isolating to catch up. And as cases increase over time, I think that's going to become more and more of a problem for schools.
Sydney Stringer isn't alone. Newsnight has spoken to schools up and down England in the same position. An SEN school in Liverpool whose allocation has been cut from 38 to 8. Another in the city from 177 to 37. One in Reading gone from 40 to 8. One in North London from 38 to 8. One in Leeds from 61 to 13. One in Chorley from 22 to 1. And there are many more besides, in some places by up to 80%. The Department for Education told us,
as we move into half-term, and in the context of significant global demand, we're updating our allocation process to more accurately align orders with the number of students schools typically have self-isolating, ensuring as many children as possible benefit from receiving a device this term.
But 15% of the pupils at this school are self-isolating at any one time. These pupils are lucky and have received IT that the school sources itself. But if they didn't have it, there would be a big problem.
You got the Chromebook from the school?
Yeah.
And if you hadn't had that, do you think you'd have been able to continue your work while you were in isolation?
Yes, I know it would be easier if you had a Chromebook, but it would be even harder if you didn't.
The Chromebook I can take anywhere. And like, we have a computer at home, but it's in the living room, so I don't get to take it to my room.
So it's helpful. You can take your Chromebook to your room.
Yeah, to do it peacefully.
Yeah.
I've had like a laptop, my sister's laptop that I used to use, but you know, she has to go online to go to uni and stuff, so you know, it's been hard to find a laptop.
How is this for a scary school equation? Add together the lost school time, the holiday hunger, the inequalities of home learning, and a higher education system already basically full, and it equals a bleak picture for social mobility. This is the great worry in education right now, that without more drastic policy intervention, the life chances of the class of 2021 and those below could be, as one head teacher put it to me, the most unequal and unfair we've seen in years.
Lewis Goodall with that report. Well, to discuss this further, we're joined by the Labour peer and Professor of Science and Society at Imperial College London, Lord Robert Winston, and the Conservative MP, Charles Walker. Lord Winston, if I can start with you, do you accept that assessment from Lewis of a perfect storm, essentially, for the poorest children in Britain, as has been laid out?
Well, I think it's worse than you've laid it out, actually, to be fair. There are 1.3 million children on school meals just in England alone. And as an ambassador to schools all over the country for Imperial College, I visit some of the poorest schools, a vast number, particularly coastal districts and places where there's unemployment, in East Anglia, in South Yorkshire, northeast of England, and so on. And what I see is absolutely shortage of resources. And of course, you mentioned the computer thing as well. But I think that the problem is although you made a comment about, look, I'm not speaking for the Labour government I'm not speaking for the Labour Party as is. I'm speaking for myself simply as an individual who's very concerned about education. And what I can tell you is this, that in fact, it may be true that school meals were not fully implemented by the Labour Party, but it's a totally different situation now. And this last year, we've seen children affected by a massive pandemic, one of the worst crises ever. And these children are frightened and they are suffering serious ill health as a result of this. Some of them have, studies in Cambridge show that there's a rise in mental ill health, particularly in teenagers self-harming as never before, for example. And when you combine that with poor nutrition, what you end up is with poor cognition and poor development. And there's so many scientific studies which show that. And therefore, I think something which the government has to do something about. And by the way, I must say, this report, I've read it through from cover to cover.
You mean the Dimbleby report?
The Dimbleby,
Yeah.
I just read it through. And actually, it doesn't remotely cover the problem. But I'll explain to you why in due course. I've talked enough for the moment.
Well, let me just... Do you understand the government's reluctance to hand out vouchers or to put people in a position where it says it would encourage dependency? Is that valid to you?
Well, they're dependent on education too, aren't they? They're dependent on a lot of things. We're talking about the future of our society. These children will be the society of the next generation. And if we don't actually treat them properly, there will be a very negative effect on our society and on the health of our society in 20 to 25 years' time. When you start depriving children of food, all the studies show very clearly that you have a rise in adult ill health, you have a rise in depression, and you have a decrease in cognitive ability, which these children should be able to deal with. You can't learn when you're starving. All the studies, both in America and in Britain, show this. And I understand that that our MP has just been, of course, was educated in America, so he will remember that actually that's a very serious problem, not just in Oregon, but in fact throughout the United States of America as well.
I mean, we heard from Boris Johnson today, and the Prime Minister said no one wants to see children in Britain starving at Christmas. I mean, that must go without saying. Clearly, that they have got some kind of a plan, haven't they? I mean, if the Dimbleby project comes off, does that work?
Emily, forgive me, saying that nobody wants to see children starving at Christmas, that's really a very, very cheap remark. If you think about it, it's not starving at Christmas. It is, in fact, being deprived of nutrition and proper care throughout their school life. That's a real problem. OK, they might be a bit better off at Christmas, but in fact, the idea of having these holiday activities and food during the holiday activities doesn't fit the bill. And of course, the money which is reported in this report is about £9 million, which is far, far too less. No way that it could actually cover what we really need in the United Kingdom. The minimum would be at least 40 million, I think, which is not a very large sum of money, given the amount of money that the government is spending. Given that this is our future and the future of the next generation, it would seem money extraordinarily well spent.
Lord Winston, I'll come back to you. Let's go to Charles Walker. Do you accept it was an amazing spectacle, Charles, to see the Prime Minister trying to reassure people that poor British children wouldn't go starving at Christmas?
Well, I'm on here to talk about possible solutions. I'm afraid I didn't see what the Prime Minister said. But if we want to look at solutions, I think what Marcus Rashford and campaigners are asking for is £15 a week per child during holiday periods, which are 13 weeks, so about £195 a year. The total cost of providing that to 1.4 million children is £273 million a year. The area where I depart from Mr. Rashford and his fellow travellers on this is that I don't believe vouchers are the way to do it, because I lived in America, as has been noted by your other guest, and I saw food stamps being issued, and they stigmatise. So I think what we actually need to do is ensure that this money, this £195 a year, is actually given directly to parents, and that can be done through the benefits and tax.
All Marcus Rashford really did was highlight a massive hole where government policy should have been. If there was this whole project, this whole plan ready to go, you wouldn't have needed to hear it from a footballer.
So I'm not a government minister. I'm a backbench member of Parliament who's done some thinking around this. And what I'm saying is that if you want to give more money to parents who have children on free school meals, the best way to do it and the most humane way to do it, the way that ensures their dignity, that they're putting food on the table for their family, is through by increasing tax credits. And that would be about £16.20, well, exactly £16.25 a month per child to get to that figure of £195. And I think that would be a much better way of doing it than vouchers.
So Charles, I know you're a backbencher and you're actually gratifyingly outspoken from the backbenchers often. I'm trying to work out what you think the government is doing at the moment, because from a political level, it looks insane, and on a human level, it has looked horrifying. I mean, they're not doing your approach, and they haven't done the voucher approach, and they've consistently said things like, I mean, I think it was just yesterday, Danny Kruger was saying, we don't want to trap people into dependency on the state and rightly enrage people working hard. So is this government about interventionist spending, or is it about letting people stand on their own 2 feet? Because we just don't get it.
So this isn't a new issue, is it? Beveridge wrestled with this.
Well, it is getting worse, isn't it? I mean, that was the point that Lord Winston made.
So the 5 great giants, and currently the government is wrestling with the re-emergence of disease, the giant disease, and of course that is accelerating want. So of course governments are here to be criticised and challenged, but I think we're going to get to the right place. I really do, and we'll get there soon. But it's incredibly difficult, and that's not to make an excuse. It's just fact. And there's a lot of quick solutions put forward on Twitter. Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? Because actually governing a country is really complex. And as I've said, that I've had most of my constituents say to me, give children free food vouchers now, which is totally demeaning to their parents who are standing in a queue at Sainsbury or Tesco, pulling out a voucher to buy food, immediately identifying themselves as being hard up. So there's a more humane way of doing it.
Right, but we're fixating on the vouchers because there are 1 million plus people in food poverty, young children. I mean, is it, Lord Winston, is it very difficult? Is this something that all governments are grappling with, and in the middle of a pandemic it's natural, or is this something that should have been sorted out years ago?
Well, it's a really interesting point. No, I think, in fact, we're doing very badly in this country, unfortunately. It is a terrible thing to say that, because, of course, we've had a wonderful system. And I think, actually, we've failed. I think the country has failed in many ways. I think it's very surprising when you consider, for example, the cost of these free meals. It's far less than we've been spending, the massive amount of money we've wasted on the track and trace program, for example, and the moonshot program, which the Prime Minister has been suggesting, will cost almost like the entire NHS, according to the British Medical Association. Now, admittedly, the BMA is somewhat political, but nonetheless, it is a complete failure to come to something which is a basic human problem. And of course, we may have 1.3 million children at the moment on free school meals, but this is going to rise because, of course, more and more people are out of work. And no matter how the Chancellor tries to deal with that, that's going to be an increasing problem in due course as jobs fall. And therefore, there's going to be more poverty, not less. So I think this is a very, very serious issue, and it has to be taken promptly. And I'm afraid I have to say this, as a scientist, as somebody who's been very much involved with some of the COVID issues, I have to say the government's been very slow in taking critical decisions, and this is yet another example.
Yeah. Sir Charles, I mean, if the Dimbleby plan, if our understanding is right and the Dimbleby plan is the remedy, is that the right one? I mean, do you do this for every holiday? Do you do this for every hungry child? Or do you solve it in a different way? I mean, this isn't your voucher system, but this is a kind of camp where the kids get a meal after they've had some education during the Christmas holidays. Is that the right solution, you think? I think we might have lost Sir Charles Walker. Sorry, he's frozen. We will end that there, gentlemen, but thank you both very much for your time. Thank you.